Okay, so just a review, we have action one, complete ranking. So this means that our decision rule, so when I say decision rule or method, I refer to those methods that we discussed about choosing that can help us choose the best option or the best action. So just to avoid confusion, rule, I will use the word rule to refer to those techniques. When I say criteria, I I use criteria to refer to this set of actions. So when I say criteria of a good decision rule, it means that these are the actions or these are the things that we require that our rule should follow, okay, or in order to be, in order for it to be rational in a way. So let's just have a short review. So first is complete ranking. It means that the rule should be able to give us a ranking of the actions. So it means that should give us the best, the second best, third best, and the worst action, something like that. So that when we have to make a decision later, what actions to take, and it happened, and when in the case that the best option is no longer viable or it's no longer possible to take, then we can take the next best action and so on and so forth. Okay, so this is one of the criteria that we require for our decision rule. It should give us a ranking. Action one, action two, it means that it should be independent of the labeling. So what it means is that um, even if we label action one, we label it with action two, it should still be uh, it should still select the best action independent of the labeling that we assign. So we can assign A1 or we can assign C1, or even we can assign A1 to A2, as long as that action actually refers to those outcomes given the state of nature, then it should be uh, selected. No, so it means that the preference does not depend on how we label the action. Right? This is in other words, right? So action two, same thing with action three. The scale as well should not uh, sort of influence our preference on the best action. Okay, so even if we use maybe a good example, if you are looking at monetary outcomes, so even if you use yen or peso or Philippine peso or dollar, Canadian dollar, it shouldn't change. Okay, it should be consistent with what actions we have selected, regardless of the currency that we're talking about. Okay. Then, of course, action four is strong domination. If there is an action that dominates another action, okay, across the state of nature, then that action should be selected. Okay, it doesn't make sense to select an action. Uh, it doesn't make sense that if we have two actions and one action is better across all uh, state of nature, it doesn't make sense to select the worst between the two. Okay, so our rule should follow or should satisfy this action for strong domination. Hmm? And of course, we have action five. Action five is what we call the independence of irrelevant alternatives. So what do we mean by irrelevant alternatives? So when we talk about irrelevant alternatives, we're actually, because usually we want to compare actions pairwise, right? So we want to compare action one to action two. We want to compare action three to action four. Okay, so if we have to make a decision which action we would prefer between action one and action two, the presence of another action should not in any way influence or should not change our preference between action one and action two. That is the idea of independence of relevant alternatives. So an example that is usually given in our textbook is when you visit a restaurant. So for example, you went to um, a restaurant like. Can you give me an example of a restaurant that you usually visit Ani?
Dito po sa Mlang is Roanas po. Roanas Grill.
Ruanas. So it's like they serve grill, no? They grilled foods. So for example, if they have they are, so it's dahil pandemic ngayon, so hindi lahat no, na-offer sa menu. Okay, meron lang silang mga menu or meron lang silang mga meals na ino-offer. Hindi lahat nandoon, no? Hindi lahat available because nga kaunti lang yung customer na pupunta dahil pandemic. So suppose you visited visited Ruena's, no? Grill. Okay. Then when she look at the menu, ang available lang is yung roast chicken, roasted chicken or pork barbecue. Between these two choices, Ani, ano ba yung pipiliin mo, Ani? Would you prefer roast chicken or
Chicken barbecue po.
well,
Chicken.
roast chicken or chicken barbecue? Okay, so between pork barbecue and roast chicken, so Annie prefers roast chicken. Okay, what if suddenly the waiter, my waiter ba dyan, approach you, waiter approaches you and said,
Yes po.
ma'am, we actually have, ano ma'am, we actually have balbakwa or we actually have or grilled atay, liver. Okay, would that information lead you to change your preference between a grilled chicken or pork barbecue? So given only that information, na ma'am, meron pala kaming, we actually also serve at today grilled liver. Would that information lead you to choose pork barbecue over chicken barbecue?
Dili, sir.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, that's the idea of independence of irrelevant alternatives. Okay? But there are also, actually, merong mga, this is very highly contentious ito kasi decision theories argue, some people may argue that actually the presence of a third alternative may or indirectly change your preference over, so the knowledge, a knowledge of another alternative may actually change your preference between two alternatives. One case may be, okay, I'm offering you a barbecue, roasted barbecue and roasted pork. And then I say, okay, and then I select roasted pork barbecue. Okay, and then the waiter um, later said, ma'am, we also have actually balbak. And then you think about, okay, maybe I'll order barbakwa para meron akong sabaw. But I don't want actually na balbakwa and pork barbecue kasi pork na ang balbakwa, pork din yung barbecue. So I'll just prefer chicken barbecue. So that is actually a possibility in terms of in practical, that it may possibly change the presence of another alternative may possibly change your preference over two preference. So, but for now, let's just assume that action 5 holds, that even if there is an alternative, it will not influence our preference between other two, the preference over other two alternatives. So yan yung tinatawag nating independence of irrelevant alternatives. So that's it, action 5. And then we have also action 6. Okay, so observe these two table. Ano yung pinagkaiba ng dalawang table na ito? How are the two tables different? So as you notice, we just added plus 10 on the first column. So 6 plus 10, 3 plus 10. Now, our idea is that even if we add a constant to one column, it should not affect because we are actually adding constant on the column and not on the row. So even if, so it's the same increase, okay, for two actions. No? So even if we add a constant here, and then we actually prefer action A, the addition of plus 10 will not change our preference. It will not shift our change from, it will not shift our choice from A1 to A2, even if we add a constant. No? So it makes sense naman kasi kung mag-add ka ng constant, of course, they will both increase on that state of nature. And still, your decision would be to choose A1. No, if you choose A1 here, then here, even if you add plus 10, you will still choose A1. So that is the idea of independence of addition of a constant to a column. Now, these succeeding axioms, this actually characterize the problem, or this actually characterize the reality of making decisions under ignorance. Okay, because the idea of ignorance is we cannot know anything about the state of nature. So it means that we cannot say that one state of nature is more likely to happen than another state of nature. So yan yung idea. So that's why we have these succeeding actions to characterize decision problems that are actually, or that are under ignorance. Okay. So if you're going to make a choice between A1 to A2, which action would you take? Let's have some Kesha. Kesha?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So given this table, Kesha, what action would you take?
Um, A1, sir.
A1, why?
Uh, not really sure, sir, pero
No?
kaya siya ang first na murag action tas na ay dako siya og value, sir.
But
Sa
how about
later.
A2?
Wala. Same,
Di
same.
ba?
Mm.
Yan ang sinasabi natin. Because you cannot really know kung anong state ang lalabas. So it's either you choose A1, A2, because this is under ignorance. You
Oo.
cannot decide between A1 and A2. Your decision should be different because you did not know, right? But if it is under risk, and if we have more chance, we have a higher probability that this state of nature will occur, then we may select A1. But since we do not know anything, right? So
Okay.
that is the axiom 7. So that is what we call the independence of row permutation. It means that if there is an action and there's another action wherein that action is just a permutation of the outcomes, even if we put here, let us say we put here 3 and then 0 and 6, then we shouldn't prefer any, because the outcome is just this, it's just
Same.
the same, because we cannot say anything about what would be the true state of nature. Yeah. So you get the idea between you get the idea on action 7, right? So this is what we call the independence of row permutation. So decision rule should be blind, considering one action is just the outcome of one action is just a permutation of another action. So it should be indifferent between the two actions. Yeah. And that sort of captures the characterization of a decision under ignorance. Okay. Next, let's consider this. Let's consider this again. Let's hear from, yes, Novi. No, Novi, are you there?
Yes, po, sir. I'm here.
We're na busy sa model, no? Okay. Let's see. Okay, this another 7 pa rin. Wala, dapat action 8 na ito. Okay, let's have action 8. Okay, no. Given this decision table, which action would you prefer?
A
Action.
prime 1, A
A
prime
prime
sub 1
1,
po.
because even if I repeat this column up to 100, it doesn't matter, because I can just actually put them together, like just how you call it, combine them into just one action, one state of nature. Okay, so my A1, okay, in decision under ignorance, even if I repeat that, it doesn't matter. Okay, it means that I can just collapse. No, that's the word I'm trying to say a while ago. We can just collapse them, all this duplicated column, into just one column, which is just 4, 6. It doesn't matter. Yeah, if it's under ignorance, decision under ignorance. So that is the motivation behind axiom 8. If it is really a decision under ignorance, even if there is a 100 state of nature, but the first but the second to 100 just give me the same outcome, I can just collapse them into just one state of nature and still select the action with the highest or with the most preferred outcome. Okay, so that is action 8, which is the independence of column duplication. Okay. Now that we have discussed all these actions, so those are the 8 actions. So put that in your heart. Okay? Dapat maano niyo yan, ma-memorize ninyo, no? Magising kayo sa umaga, tanungin kayo what are the actions, the 8 actions for it, or criteria of a good decision risk. You can say this automatically with ranking, labeling, value scale, strong domination, independence of relevant alternatives, independence of addition of constants to a column, independence of row permutation, and dependence of column duplication. So we have finished. Okay, we have done enumerating the actions, okay, or the criteria which make up the good decision. Now we have to be critical. Okay, we have to ask this question: which of the methods, yung mga na-discuss na natin, yung maximin, yung regret, yung optimism, pessimism index, yung Laplace, sa mga method na yon, alin doon kaya ang makasatisfy sa lahat ng actions? And then we can say that that is the best. And even if you still propose additional technique, then that technique will always be as good as or less good as this particular rule that satisfies these 8 actions. Okay, so let us try. Let's have let us solve this. No, so unahin natin siguro ang action 1. Okay, action 1. They should provide a action 1 complete ranking. Lahat ba ng ating method na na-discuss so far give us a ranking of the alternatives or of the actions? Lahat ba? Or merong isa doon na hindi nagbibigay ng rank but it just tells us which one is the best? Yun lang sinasabi. Ano muna tayo? Review muna tayo. Ano yung 4 na method na discuss natin, Ivy?
Sir, sa akong remember sir kay katong min max, max min, regret, max min,
Okay.
sir.
Maximin?
Maximin deh, sorry.
Okay, then?
Minimax, minimax.
Minimax.
Then,
Regret.
regret. Nakalimut ko sa isa, sir.
Katong optimism.
Tama. Tapos, pessimism.
Pessimism. And then, yung isa is yung Laplace. Ano nga yung Laplace? Yung insufficient information. So, it just Laplace just assumes that all state of nature are equally likely. Okay? So, yun lang sinasabi niya. Okay, so can we now identify kung ang maximum ba, does it give us ranking? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Yes, give us, no? Kasi it just actually rank the action based on the ang ginagawa niya is first it tries to identify yung pinaka-worst, tama? And then from that
Best of the
worst,
worst.
hanapin natin yung best or yung ranking ng worst. So, nira-rank pa rin niya. So, that is good. Okay. Sa minimax regret, nira-rank ba niya?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
tama. Yeah, nira-rank niya. Kasi meron kang regret, then nanap lang niya yung action. First, sinanap niya yung regret for each state of nature, and then just apply the maximin. Yan lang ginagawa niya actually. Okay? Optimism. Yes or no? Yes, di ba?
Yes.
As the same lang siya na maximum, kaya lang meron lang siyang alpha. Laplace. Definitely. right? Because it actually computes us. Remember that that plus does not actually tell us that you compute it on the expected value. Okay, that's just how we select the action. But actually, the Laplace insufficient information, the principle there is just we assume that all state of nature are equal. Okay, but of course, the Laplace there that we discussed actually give us a complete ranking. Okay, good. Okay, action 2, independence of labeling. So Alex, yung maximin ba, meron, kung bago-baguhin ba natin yung label ng action o ng column, mabago ba yung ating preference?
Dili ata, sir.
Dili. Good. Minimax. Good.
Dili gyapon, sir.
Correct. Pessimism.
Dili gyapon.
Correct. And Laplace is
Dili gyapon.
dili. Good. Actually, you can verify it actually by just using but of course it's quite straightforward kasi ito independence of labeling. It will not change anything. Yeah? Action 3 is scaling. Pag gumamit ba pag gumamit ba tayo ng ibang scaling, magbabago ba ang preference natin kung mag-maximin?
Siguro dili sir if i-apply nimo ang scaling sa tanan na values or sa tanan
Correct.
na column.
Correct. Good. How about minimax regret?
Marag parehas lang sila sir.
Correct. Optimism?
Ang parehas lang
Correct.
sir.
Hindi ko na-check. Laplace?
Yeah, yes sir, parehas lang po.
Does it? Ang Laplace? Okay, why don't we prove this? Kasi minsan, di ba? Remember that Laplace actually does a assigned probability and then it computes expected. No? It might be straightforward to show na scaling, no matter what type of scaling we use, does not actually change your order of preference among actions using Laplace. So how do we prove that for the case of Laplace? Note that we denote Vij, okay, as the outcome. Action I, state of nature J, is the value outcome for a particular decision. Now, if we apply a scaling, what we mean by scaling, we can actually derive a new value because we scale it. What are the possible scaling? It's either we multiply it or we add it. Okay? We add a constant or we multiply it. That's all scaling yan siya. So we can just, in general term, we can just denote as alpha times Vij plus beta. Of course, we require alpha to be greater than 0. So this one captures the new values. If we specify specific alpha and beta, we specify a scaling for the values. Okay? So, yung sinabi ni Jeremy, kung i-apply natin lahat, then we should get this. Now, based on the principle, we can actually, for each action, we can compute a value. Let us say Vi. Okay? So, suppose yung Vi natin, yan yung ating value na i-assign for each action. So, based on our discussion, this Vi is just summation of 1 over n if we have n state of nature, Vij. Correct? Without the scaling. Okay? And this is j to n. No? So this is the Laplace. And this is 1 over n. Of course, that is the sort of probability of each state. Now, if Vi is preferred over, let us say, Vk. So let us say here, assume that Ai is preferred over K. So usually, ang symbol ng preference is parang ganyan siya. Parang ganyan siya ba? Ganyan. Yung symbol. But it's not, because Ai here, Ak is not actually value, but it's actually a action. So hindi talaga siya greater than. But if we are going to deal with values, and then we selected Ai over Ak, then the corresponding value that we assign, the Vi should be greater than, right? Since we prefer Ai. So, and this will be our Vk. Gets pa ba natin hanggang dito? Okay pa? So therefore, if we prefer action I over action K, the value that we assign to action I, kung sa Laplace pa yan yung ating expected value, no, should be greater than AK. Now, let's try to see yung kung i-scale natin siya. So it means na kung i-scale natin siya, ano mangyari dito? We can just multiply that by the expected is actually also scaled. So pwede natin sabihin na ito ay na-scale. Plus beta should be greater than alpha. Lagay ko na lang k, huwag na lang k equals 1. Plus beta. Of course, given that alpha is 0. Yeah, understandable naman yan siya. Kung positive, of course. Now, if we simplify this, since wala naman itong alpha here, we can put the constant, okay, inside. Right? Or we can put the alpha inside. Since this is a constant, so kung ipasok natin dito ang b, ano mangyari dito kay b? Kung constant ito siya. Number summation of b of beta from j equals 1 to n, anong result nito?
And beta.
And beta. Tama? So actually, kung titingnan mo to, meron to siyang, para beta lang siya, anong dapat dito? Should be 1 over n. Tama? So, kung itong beta, palitan natin siya ng ganito, pwede na siyang ilabas yung 1 over n. So, yan ay magiging plus beta. Okay? So, ang summation understood na 1 over n alpha bij plus beta is nandun yung kasali yung summation dito. Okay? Na naintindihan to na part. It's very easy naman. Okay? Same here. Yeah? So, summation of 1 over n alpha bkj plus beta. Now, notice that this part is actually Vij, just actually Vi prime, and that is actually summation of 1 over n Vij alpha, Vij prime. Okay, and that is actually greater than summation of 1 over a Vkj prime or Vk. So this just show that even if we apply the or, it implies that Vi prime is greater than. So this proves that Laplace is independent of or the choice is not affected, or the preference is not affected by the scaling. That's nice. Okay, so that's our short proof that Laplace actually satisfies the scaling. Good. Question? Okay, very clear naman. Okay, so ayan, maganda. So far, so good kasi nag-satisfy sila sa ating mga actions. Let's have action 4, which is
Strong domination. Domination po.
Ang maximin ba? Strong domination? Sino ba yung nagsagot-sagot? Si Nobi. Ikaw ba yun, Nobs?
Yes, sir. Hindi ko sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, of course,
Yes,
because it's
yes.
comparing value, no?
Yes po.
Okay, minimax.
Yes.
Correct. Optimism.
Yes.
Good. Laplace.
Yes.
Yes, siyempre, kung mas malaki lahat ng value niya, kung kunan mo ng average, is always greater than, right?
Yes.
Action 5, independence of irrelevant alternative. Ang ano ba? Maximin ba? Will our choice change between two actions between two actions? Kung meron tayong isang alternative nag-exist, it doesn't, right? Because we are just comparing which one is higher, right? So it does not change. How about minimax secret? Does it follow the independent of irrelevant alternative? Minimax? No. I will show later why. Optimism, yes, because halos same naman yan siya. And of course, Laplace, of course, it follows as well. Because the computation, the computation of the expected outcome will not in any way change the preference between the two because the values there are not affected. Ang minimax regret lang affected. Why? Because we are actually looking at the regret. We are actually considering other other actions when we compute for regret. Okay, so I said that, of course, it will not satisfy um, the minimax regret. Okay, let's show an example that it does not actually satisfy. So let's have this. Let's apply minimax regret. Si ano gyapon? Si Novi gyapon. Novi, ano ang first na gagawin natin pag mag-minimax regret tayo? Compute regret here.
First, sir, determine the regret for each value
Correct.
for a given state of nature.
Correct. So ano ang regret? Ano ang first? Let's consider first B1. Ano ang regret natin for A1? Kung A1 ang pinili natin, anong regret?
0.
Correct. Walang
Zero.
regret. Ha? Pero pag A2, tapos B1 ang lumabas, 6 yung regret. Tama? So ito, ang ginawa ko positive kasi sa book kasi pro negative. I don't want to deal with negative masyado kasi medyo confusing. So let's deal with positive. Okay. B2 Bernido, anong regret ko for A1?
3.
Good.
Ay.
A2?
0.
0. For B3?
3.
3. A2?
0.
0. Okay. Okay, after ko ma-compute ang regret table, ano ang next step?
Take the maximum regret for each action. Choose the action that has the lowest regret.
So ano ang gagawin ko dito? So ano ang aking kumbaga V1 yun to. So ano dito ang aking maximum regret?
Ang maximum ay 3. Ay 3.
Correct. So 3, right? So kumbaga yung pinakita kong proof kanina, ito yung VI natin, yung 3 for action A, action A1. So what is for action A2, ano yung aking regret?
6.
6. Okay. So after this, ano ang gagawin ko?
Choose the action that has the lowest regret. So
Correct.
3.
So I will choose
3.
3. Anong action yan?
Sir,
Anong action to 3? Anong action to 3? Associated action niya.
action 1.
Correct. A1. Okay. Now, let's add an alternative. Let's try to see whether even if there is A3, I would still choose A1 over A2. Let's add. Okay, let's compute the regret again. Regret table. Given na meron tayong action A3. So dito ang regret niya is 0. Dito is 6. Dito naman ay
4.
4. Dito ay 9.
9.
Dito ay
6.
6. This is
0.
0.
0.
Dito ay
3.
3, 0, and
2.
2. Okay. Now I'm going to compute the V's, which is just the value that I assign to each action. And based on minimax regret, I get the maximum regret for each, right? So what's the maximum regret for A1?
9.
9.
For A2?
6.
6.
For A3? 4. Now, tignan muna natin ito kasi kanina, between A1 and A2, we would prefer A1. But with the presence of A3, which one do you prefer now with the presence of A3? Based on this.
1.
Ha?
A3.
Hindi.
Maximum.
Dito lang muna sa dalawa, A1 and A2. Ano yung
A2.
i-prefer mo? A2. Correct? So, in our sense, ano nangyari? With A3, nabago yung preference natin between A1 and A2. Correct? So, kaya sabi natin kanina, minimax regret does not satisfy action 5. Yan. Kuha. Si kanina, walang A3, A1 yung pinili. Ngayon, meron ng A3, naging A2. Ito yung sinasabi kanina ni Annie. No? Nag-order siya ng pork barbecue. Tapos merong, nag-order siya ng roasted chicken or chicken na barbecue. Kung meron bang third alternative, let us say, grilled liver or roasted liver, mag-change ba? Sabi niya no. But actually, if you use minimax, it might change given this specific example. So therefore, minimax regret does not satisfy the independence or independent of irrelevant alternatives. Let's proceed to action. Ano nga yung action 6?
Independence of addition of a constant to a column.
Independence of, gilay ko na lang para shortcut, addition of a constant to a column. Okay, let's try to see maximin. Does maximin satisfies this? Actually, no. Same with optimism. Halos pareha lang kasi yan sila. But it will satisfy minimax regret in Laplace. Now, let's show by example. Ito yung sasabihin, counter example. But maximin does not satisfy this. Suppose I will add 10. But before 10, let's try to analyze this muna on maximin. So the worst thing will happen. So therefore, we will have here our VI, our V's here. For action 1 is 4. And our A2, our action is what? 3. Okay? Now we get the maximum, so we would select A1. Okay, it's the maximum. Now let's add a constant to first column. So ang B1 natin, B2, mag-add tayo ng 10. Okay, so naging 16. Ito naman naging 13. Ito ay naging 4. So what's the worst here? 4. What's the worst here? 8. So ano na ngayon ang maximum?
A2.
8 na. Good. So therefore, maximin does not follow or does not satisfy action 6. Because just by adding a constant, we're able to show that maximum shift the preference between A1 to A2. And this is same thing with optimism because usually kasi pag hindi mag-satisfy ang maximum, hindi rin mag-satisfy kasi trade-off lang kasi ito siya. Okay? So in the same way na magsabi nating we can always set alpha here equal to 1/4 or equal to a constant that will not satisfy. So an example here is, suppose here that our alpha is 1/4. So we compute here, of course, the best and the worst. So what's the best? What's the best here? The worst and the best. Okay. So S1 is 4, best is 6. So naman is 3, and the best is 8. Now apply natin. 1/4 times 4 is 1. 1/4 times 4 plus 3/4 times 6 is equal to. So this will be 1 and this will be 2, 3. 2 and 3. So 9/2. Correct?
Yes.
So 1 plus 9/2 is
11/2.
okay, or 22/4. Okay? Or 11/2. Dito naman, ang lalabas is if you compute, you get 27/4. So if you're going to use to select here, the highest, of course, you would select A2. Okay. Now, what if we add here 10? So this will become, so our best here would be 16. And here, our worst here is 8. The best is 13. Now, if we compute 4 times 16, 16 times 3/4, we get 52/4. And for this, we get 47/4. And the best now is A1. So kanina A2, ngayon naman ay. So this shows that optimism as well do not satisfy action 6. I want you to, kayo naman, okay? I want you to show ano yung out of these 4, ano yung action ang ano yung rule or method ang mag-satisfy ng action 7, which is independence of row permutation. I give you 5 minutes kung ano yung mga maximi, minimax among maximi, minimax regret, optimism, Laplace ano yung mag-satisfy or hindi mag-satisfy for row permutation. Sabay na lang din natin, action 8, column duplication. So sa tingin mo, saan dyan ang nag-satisfy at hindi nag-satisfy?
Sa action 7, sir, is ang maximin and optimism and pessimism. Sa maximin and pessimism for action 7.
Ang nag-satisfy. Good. Very good.
Opo.
Pati Laplace, di ba? Doesn't matter kasi. Kasi yung permutation y, well, it's quite intuitive for Laplace because you're computing averages, right? Doon ba siya malagay sa first? Doon ba siya malagay sa third or last? Yung sum na weighted doesn't matter because it's commutative. So, Laplace also satisfy. But for minimal regret, it's not. Okay? It's quite intuitive as well because if you permute it, then for the computation of regret, for the computation of regret, it could change. Yeah, kung ano yung partner sa kanya na outcome for that state of nature. We will show that during the exam na lang siguro. Paano siya i-show na minimal regret does not satisfy 7. Action 8. Ano kaya yung mga hindi mag-satisfy?
Ang Laplace, ay,
Correct. Yeah, that's very clear. Kasi nga, habang pinapadami mo yung state of nature, bumababa yung probability. Tama? So kung mababa yung probability natin, then yung mga malalaki tend to be higher compared to the lower. Okay? So ano napansin natin? Walang isa mang rule ang nagsatisfy sa lahat. But of course, the question is, meron kayang rule? Hindi pa natin naisip. Yan yung mga tanong ng mga mathematician. No? Marami silang pinoproblema sa buhay. Tinatanong nila yan. And we can actually show that there is no rule that exists that will satisfy all these 8 actions. No matter how hard you try, wala kayong makitang rule na ganun. And that is actually we need to prove that, of course, no? Ano kaya ang hindi makasatisfy? Of course, i-reason ko na, we have now our first theorem. Well, it's not the first theorem. Theorem natin, no decision rule will satisfy all actions. Always remember that. No matter how hard you try, wala tayong makikitang rule that will satisfy all actions. And we have always to keep that in mind, okay? When we make decision under ignorance. And then you have to ask yourself, ano ba dito ang based on because every decision is unique. Okay, although we try to abstract it in a matrix or a table into just outcomes, into just state of natures and actions. But in reality, every decision is unique. Ano ba yung mas bibigyan natin ng weight? Yun bang irrelevant alternative? Mahalaga ba yun? Possible ba sa decision natin that the presence of irrelevant alternative may influence? Then, if that is a consideration, then you should use the minimax because it will not satisfy the irrelevant alternatives. Okay? O importante ba sa atin yung row permutation? If we are really making decisions under ignorance, then it should be important. So yan yung ating mga questions. So based dito, if we're just going to look at the number of actions that it violates, maganda yung maximin, optimism, tsaka yung Laplace. No? Itong minimax, medyo dalawa ang kanya, so medyo strike to siya dyan. So yan ang medyo mahirap sa ating choice. And then of course, we have another theorem. If a decision rule satisfies axiom 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7, so ano yung axiom 1? Ranking. Ano yung 4?
strong domination, sir.
Strong domination. Ano yung 5?
Independence of irrelevant activities.
Okay. Ano yung number 6?
Independence of addition.
Addition. Correct. Number 7?
Independence of row permutation.
Correct. If a decision rule satisfy these 5, then that decision rule is equivalent to Laplace. Kung meron man kayo ma-discover na rule na nag-satisfy kay 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's the same as Laplace. So that is our second theorem. We will prove that, don't worry. But for now, I think it's better if you just read first the book and then we will try to prove that. Pwede na natin yan siyang pwede na natin yan siyang ma-discuss siguro. I'll just give you a proof, recording sa proof kung paano natin yan siya ma-show. Okay? Yes, so that's it. That's it for our decision under ignorance. Yeah, we're ready now to move to our next lesson, which is decision under risk. Remember that yung regret natin, minimax, of course, we get the regret and then we try to select ano ba yung maximum regret, then find the least regret. Now, what if we, instead of doing that, we compute the mean regret? Is it still different from the insufficient if we compute the mean regret rather than the mean of the actual outcome? That's one question that can be interesting for that particular decision rule. And then there is also another decision rule. Yun namang tinatawag nating sum of ranks criterion. So we try to rank the action. Then after we try to rank, then we try to get the sum. And then that sum might be used to suggest a new way to select decision. Okay, so let's analyze yung mga binigay ko kanina na palaisip paano. So meron tayong isang, kasi ito yung ginawa ng Osang lately. Nag-select sila. Pinatin lang yan. Nag-select sila ng scholar, no? For the presidential. They actually use ranks rather than the actual values. Okay? So let's try to analyze. Does it make sense to use ranks and then later compute sums and averages? We will analyze that here. Okay, let's have, so just to, para clear naman yung anong nagsasabi-sabi ko dito. Kita niyo itong screen ko. So for example, let's consider, okay, so merong nag-propose, siguro letas yan, nag-propose dyan is si IB. Sabi ni IB, sir, meron ako naisip na isang magandang method paano tayo magpili ng preference, no? IB, ano man yung naisip mo? Sabi ni IB, sir, ngayon, ang gagawin natin is, instead of dealing with the values, i-convert natin sila sa rank. Okay? So, paano yan siya i-convert sa rank? Sabihin natin na, for each state of nature, i-rank natin yung action. Kung ano yung pinaka-best, bigyan natin ng rank 1, tsaka yung pinaka-worst is, in this case, it's there for action, bigyan natin siya ng rank 4. Okay? And we repeat that for every state of nature. Okay, makes sense naman, di ba? No? So, in that case, kung malaki naman talaga, balik rin lang yung pinakamaliit na rank, yun ang pinaka-best. Okay, makes sense naman. So, let's first find the rank on this B1. Ano ba yung pinakamataas dito na rank IV? O value na may pinakamataas na rank?
A1, sir.
Okay, so ito ay magiging 1. Yan ay magiging 1. Ano ang 2?
Dili ko average sa
Pwede.
M3, so
Oo, naitay.
0.5.
2.5. Ito is
0.4.
and this is
4 na siya.
4. Good. B2. Ito yung 1.
Si 3 to
Ay! Este. May mo magugag 3 muna na sulat na ako. Sige. And here is
1.
1. 2 plus 3
3 ilang rank, sir?
3. Yun sa man pag-determine, that's 2 plus 3 plus 4.
3 plus 4 divided by 3.
Divided by 3. Good. Because 2 plus 3 is 5 plus 4 is 9 by 3. Good. So here is
1.5.
Good. And
3.5, sir.
now, ang gagawin natin, isasum lang natin ng rank. So 1 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1.5.
9.5.
Ito naman
9.
is 1.
7, 10, 11.5, sir.
11.5. This one is 6. 6 plus 5,
11 po.
11. Okay. And then we select just the best. I mean, the least. Kasi di ba, we rank it sa pinakababa. So, pinakababa ang best. A2. Good. So, based dito, ang A2 ang pinakamababa. And this is actually same choice as yung ating kanina, maximin. May tininan ko lang yung Okay, let's compute the maximin nga. Let's use the maximin muna to find kung same ba siya. So, ID pa rin. Ano yung regret pinaka-low dito? 0, di ba? And then 1, and then
0.
0, and then 0. So, therefore, the lowest is, the highest is 1. So, we have the same actually. So, well, makes sense. The question is, doon sa mga binigay natin na axiom, ano kaya yung mga axiom na violate ng decision rule na ito? Yun ang gusto nating malaman. Kung ranking ating gagawin. Ranking and then summing them. Yun yung magiging isa sa mga questions natin sa exam. Na given ang ganitong decision rule, ano kaya yung mga axioms ang hindi niya masatisfy? Yun yung mga possible questions sa ating exam. Show that for this type of decision rule, hindi niya masatisfy ang axiom 5 and axiom 8. Okay, so the easiest way that of course is to either give a counterexample kung hindi mag-satisfy and then show a proof kagaya ng ginawa natin sa Laplace kung mag-satisfy naman siya. So that would be our exercise natin or possible questions natin sa ating exam. So independent of relevant alternative. Okay. Dependence or irrelevant. Nakita ko sa kanila na if you do it on ranks, the ranking would change kung meron kayong additional candidates. And then action 8 is yung column. So always remember that if you deal with ranks actually, rather than the actual value, you will be violating this. It means that nagbabago ang rank. Depende kung meron kayong ibang mga participants. Kagaya ng yung ginawa kasi nila, nag-rank sila ng mga candidates based on several criteria. And then they compute the weighted rank. So ang nangyari, depende kung meron lang 5, meron 10, o meron 3, nag-iiba-iba ang rank ng mga candidate for scholarship. So yun ang bantayan natin. No? Kaya ito, kasi itong column duplication is halos same lang yan siya sa independence or relevant because column duplication actually adds additional state of nature or actually adds more criteria. And then itong independence of irrelevant alternative naman actually adds the ranking changes kung marami kayong kinoconsider na mga actions. So that would be your assignment. Show that this particular type of ranking or rule violates action 5 and action. Okay? Sige, I'll just create a submission in Canvas for this. Okay? So thank you everyone and
Sir, question sa sir, sa chat.
sige. Di, kuan gyapon. Dito gyapon sa kuan. Canvas.